Hello and welcome everyone to the latest episode in the Enqbator ThinkTenq Webinar series. And now, please enjoy our conversation with Enqbator Client Services Director, Kathy Haushen. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to Jada Montenegro from the Enqbator marketing team to help out with our questions for Kathy in our Q&A session today. Jada?
Thanks, Dave. So we have a few questions here for you, Kathy. The first one says, it sounds like you've been involved in a lot of website redesign projects. So what's a key lesson that you've learned during these?
Hi, Jada. Yep, I've actually been involved in a lot of website redesign projects. In the beginning of my career, I served as a project manager, and now I oversee the people that manage these big redesign projects. One thing I'd say is that documentation is key. A key component is the requirements. So at the beginning of each project, it's important to document what we're trying to achieve. And in those requirements, there are really 4 major components that a document like this should cover. So there's the technical requirements where you're outlining what kind of browsers, what kind of devices the website should be compatible in. You're also looking at the server architecture. Are you looking at what kind of hosting environment are you looking at? Is it a load balance hosting environment where if one server gets overloaded, it flips over to the other server? So those kinds of things under the technical section. Then you're looking at the layout and design of the template. So this would be the makeup of what the actual website's going to look like and how the layout of the content is going to be formatted on each of the pages. The content and the sitemap, so looking at the usability from a content perspective and making sure that users are going to be able to move through the website and the content easily, and that the sitemap is the backbone of that content strategy. And so organizing the content in a way that is intuitive is really important. And then the functionality, so really outlining every single piece of functionality that goes into the website. So if it's a hospital website, it's the Find a Doctor module. Like, what kind of information do you want to present on the detail page? So if a doctor, if you have a doctor profile and you have a detail page for that doctor profile, what kind of information do you want to present to users coming to that doctor profile? And then conversely, on the search page for Find a Doctor, what elements and what fields would you like them to be able to search on? Is it first name and last name? Is it specialty? Is it location? Like, what doctors are closest to me? Those kinds of things. And so each of the functionalities you would go through and document what you would like to do in each of those functionalities and how you would like them to behave. So the requirements document really provide the instructions for all of the downstream processes like development. So it provides the instructions for the developers to be able to build that functionality in the website, and then testing. And so that the requirements is a really key component of a website redesign, I would say. And then I guess the other thing is really good communication. And so when we start at the beginning of a project, we usually outline all the major milestones with the entire project team. And that helps everyone understand from a high level what milestones you're trying to hit and in what time frame. So after you run through those milestones, then the project manager will typically walk through the tasks that are associated with those milestones. And then as those tasks are worked through in the project, then the project manager really sets specific touch points with the project team just to see where we are, if we're on track with hitting those tasks, or if we're delayed on those tasks. And so these touch points are really important because it's important to keep the project moving forward. And without those touch points, sometimes with everything else going on, the project will lag. So these touch points, it really depends on the client's availability for these touch points. So sometimes we'll do the touch points in weekly meetings. We'll have weekly meetings with the client, and we'll go through the status of the project and the status of the tasks and anything that's coming up for the following week or a few weeks down the road. But sometimes the client's really busy and they're not able to meet that regularly. So these check-ins can also be over email. So the project manager might send out status reports at the end of every week just to share the progress. And then a lot of the communication is done over email. So whichever way you do the communication, either through email or with regular touch points on a meeting, it works both ways as long as you have those communication channels open.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. That is helpful. So then another question we have says, if you were to put a time frame on a complex redesign project, how long on average do you think it takes to redesign a website?
That's a good question, Jada. I think with any redesign project, it's best to prioritize and identify with the client what the minimum viable product is. And when I talk about minimum viable product, that's what's the most important components of the redesign that you want to tackle in a first phase. Because a lot of times when you're building a website, it's just like anything. You could ask for the sky and the moon, but we have to decide on what's achievable in that moment in a short amount of time, or a smaller amount of time before we can get there. And so if you take that concept and first identify what are the components that you want to achieve in that first phase, I would say, depending on the complexity of the project, most small to medium redesigns on average would take 4 to 6 months to complete. So when I say small to medium website, in my mind, that would be about 200 to 1,000 pages, maybe 2 to 4 pieces of functionality, core functionality like search, news, blog, forms, and that would include a new redesigned site. A little bit of content strategy, and you could also probably re-platform in that time frame. So if you're not happy with your current content management system, you could also move to another content management system. For larger websites with more complexity, and these are the websites that we typically handle, I would say it would likely take 9 to 12 months to complete a project like that. So a large website would probably be about 1,500 pages or more than 5 pieces of functionality. So in addition to those foundational functionalities, there could be some integrations that you might want to do with other external systems. There may potentially be a password protected portal. And then there may also be other custom functionality that we may need to build. So I know that's a kind of a rough estimate, and without knowing exactly the details of the project, that could change. But I would say on average, like that's what we would try to shoot for. Any longer than 12 months for the first phase of a website, it's really taxing on the project team. And so it really is a lot easier to and a lot more effective to break up a big project into chunks. And then that way you have, you're able to demonstrate successes and achieve some major milestones with a time frame that's a little bit more digestible.
All right, Thanks, Kathy. And then it looks like the last one that we had that came in, it says we'll be working on a redesign in the next year, and one of the things that has come up is the need for usability testing. So have you done usability testing in the past? And if so, do you think it's useful?
Yes, actually, the short answer is yes. I have done usability testing in the past, and it is very useful. If you're able to do usability testing, I think you should go for it. What it does is it accomplishes two things. So the first thing is that if you include the people that you collected information from in the beginning of the project, then that gives them a little preview of the site before it actually goes live. And so that gives them a sense of responsibility around the project. And then it just helps them become more engaged. And then the second thing is really just collecting that information in the middle of the project, when right before things are still able to be a little bit more flexible. So if there are any major changes, or if there is something that you've missed, then you're still able to fix it before you lay down that foundation. Because once you lay down that foundation, and especially on the user experience side, like if there's some pathways that that are just a little bit difficult to execute. So if you lay out a scenario that's really key to the organization, but the testers aren't able to execute it well, at that point, you're still able to make tweaks to the structure and the sitemap before it's actually completely built out. And so you're saving time in the long run. I've done usability testing two ways. I've done it with an outside agency. So if an organization has a little bit bigger budget, you can have an agency come in and do usability testing. So they would identify the participants that are needed. They would come up with the questions. They would help with building the prototype for the site. They would handle the interviews. They would videotape the interviews, and then they would distill all of that information and then present actionable goals or actionable edits to the product. But if you're not able to do that kind of usability testing and don't have that kind of budget, I've also done it internally, where we've identified our own stakeholders and really gone through all those steps I just ran through internally. So it is possible to do it both ways, depending on the budget that you have. But I think that in both cases, or in either case, you'll still be able to accomplish the things that the usability testing is good for, and that's to collect information from the stakeholders and provide them another point of engagement into the project.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. That looks like all the questions that we have, so thanks again for answering those. And then I'll turn it back over to Dave.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Jada, for your help with the Q&A segment today. And once again, thanks to everyone involved in today's ThinkTenq webinar, and especially to Kathy Houchen, of course, for her time, helpful knowledge, and experience on today's topic of website redesign. And of course, thanks again to you for watching our webinar today, and we'll see you next time for another Enqbator ThinkTenq webinar.